Welcome back to the Paranorm Girl podcast. I am your host, Kristen. Do you believe in magic, dear listeners? Once upon a time, magic was a cornerstone of the Appalachian way of life. It was evident in the way they made decisions, the way they fed their families, how they coped in the isolation, how they dispensed justice, how they healed themselves with little to no access to conventional medicine or doctors. Magic was as much a part of Appalachia as are the mountains and the trees. Born of the very land itself and the historic foundations we've recently discussed, it was a major ingredient that would help form the culture, superstition, and supernatural that lingers in the region today. Appalachian magic is a multifaceted affair that is intertwined with things like the superstitions, the do's and don'ts most of us are likely more familiar with, and things like omens and death culture of the region. It's a lot to fit into just one episode, so we will spend our next few shows together here in this magical corner exploring the different facets before moving on to things a bit more dark and creepy, creatures and other things that go bump in the night. I think you will agree at the end of this one that when we consider all of the following information and the way in which magic influenced everyday life for these people, it's no wonder Appalachia has such a wide array of cautionary superstition, paranormal, and high strangeness lore that they do today. Today's exploration will include a look at 3 parallel practices with an especial focus on the healing methods of early Appalachians and influences that would come together to help create their ideas around medicine and magic. But due to that whole intertwined thing, we'll also be including some of the more superstitious methods and ideas that helped make up folk magic of the region. A lot of what we're going to talk about is no longer used or common, but I am willing to bet some of my listeners have heard of some of this stuff and maybe even benefited from some of it. So you'll have to shoot me an email and let me know. To start, we are going to talk about powwowing, a ritual healing tradition of the Pennsylvania Dutch communities of old. And by old, I mean they brought a lot of what we would come to know as powwowing with them from various parts of Germany to the New World in the 16, 17, and 1800s. It is also known by another term, which I didn't necessarily pronounce incorrectly last time, but I sure American the heck out of it. Okay. Braucherei. It should be correct. Braucherei. German is, I don't speak German, okay? Female practitioners are called Braucherin. Male are called Braucher. We will call it powwowing. And their practitioners, powwow doctors, moving forward, okay? Powwowing was the term bestowed on this practice early on by other Puritans. Appropriated from a Narragansett tribe word for medicine man, powwow, ignorant of what the healing practice was, or what a medicine man did, for that matter, just that they were of the devil and whatever those Pennsylvania Dutch weirdos were up to was definitely some kind of devil magic. Powwow would become synonymous with magic and the devil and evolve into powwow when referring to the brand of ritual healing that was being performed by the PA Dutch. A few features of powwowing that you will see is a running theme in today's show. It was not only used for healing, but protection from physical harm and harm from unseen forces as well. It could be utilized in times of need to ensure good outcomes in everyday affairs, finding things that have been lost, removing hexes and curses. Many of its rituals include some extent of Christian or Catholic influence, such as symbols and Bible verses. Not surprising, considering these people were a deeply faithful people, mostly made up of Protestants, but in all reality had only recently converted from Catholic beliefs following the Reformation. Many folk magic traditions do what powwow did in that they equally blend faith, healing, and then some kind of ritual, using an assortment of blessings, prayers, hand gestures, and the sheer force of faith in conjunction with everyday objects, herbal knowledge, and celestial and calendar movements. Powwowing was utilized for healing of livestock and people, as well as coordination and securing of wants and needs with everyday life events, very important life events, and interactions with the spirit world. Powwowing would initially concentrate in southeast Pennsylvania, but over time would spread with the movement of German immigrants to the Midwest, Canada, the Ozarks, mid-Appalachia, and southern Appalachia. And we will be able to see its influence later when we dig into granny magic. Another shared feature was its oral tradition. Powwowing is a strictly, or supposed to be strictly, oral tradition. It was an unspoken rule that the rituals and remedies they taught were never to be written down except for reference by the practitioner. This rule would be broken in 1820 by the publishing of a book containing many of powwowing's secrets titled Long Lost Friend by John George Homan. More on this in just a moment. Another unspoken rule was this practice was to be passed down generationally to someone of the opposite sex. In so doing, this kept powwowing incredibly gender neutral, which I love. I personally love that. Female practitioners were as common as the males and known to be equally as good at their craft. This rule could only be bent should a younger family member of any gender get first-hand experience by watching and listening as an older family member powwowed on someone. Homan's book aside, the unspoken rules of gender swapping the information and committing everything to memory instead of writing it down, and also only teaching it to someone who actually wanted to learn it, has, in a way, contributed to the decline in certain rituals of powwowing, especially ones concerning things like farming, gardening, animal husbandry, and domestic life. Once very important features of life, these particular rituals were commonly practiced in their communities. For the most part, since our world has modernized and many of those needs of old are a thing of the past, those particular practices have all but disappeared or been downgraded to old-timey superstition, which is unfortunate, but a lot of powwowing's cures have survived. Now, I cannot speak from first-hand experience. I am not of Pennsylvania Dutch descent. I have never lived in Appalachia, but reading others' accounts of having had one of these remedies performed on them, it works. You gotta accept that it's gonna work, but it does seem to. Curator on a paper and author of a book of the same title, Powwowing in Pennsylvania, folklorist Patrick Don Moyer tells a story about his grandmother who, as a child, had a wart on her hand. Her grandfather noticed the wart and said, "Yo, I am gonna take care of that for you." I am paraphrasing. On the next full moon, he shows up, cuts a potato in half, rubs each half on the wart, puts the potato back together, and then buries it under the downspout of the eaves of the house, the entire time reciting something very quietly in Pennsylvania Dutch. A week later, she would look down at her hand, realizing she hadn't really thought about her wart since, and miraculously, her wart was gone. She'd been battling with it for the year prior. We are moving on to other things, briefly, but we've got more wart cures to come, darlings. Don't you fret. Don't fret about it, okay? Though there were particular people who were particularly good at the practice. Powwowing rituals could be practiced really by anyone who knew them, and many wives during the height of its practice were familiar with many of the cures, which is how some of my listeners might have had one of these remedies applied to them. You didn't have to know a powwow doctor, just an old school grandma with a belief in God and a potato to spare. Now, one more commonality powwowing shared with other folk magic and folk medicine practices was a disdain for black magic and witches. It is clear that what they practiced was in itself witchcraft. So I want to emphasize here that when I mention witch or witchcraft in the context of these old world folk systems, especially within the Pennsylvania Dutch context, they viewed the world through a puritanical lens. What they were doing was functional. It was necessary and only possible with the help and blessing of God himself. Black magic and witchcraft was the work of the devil, and one of the reasons they needed some of their powwowing rituals in the first place, to combat hexery. It was thought illness could occur naturally and be cured by natural means and ritual remedies. But it was also thought that someone with malicious intent could place a curse or hex on a person or livestock in order to cause illness. A powwower could remove effects of a simple grudge to lingering negative energy for sure, but they definitely needed to be ready to employ their knowledge in order to quickly ascertain if the ailment was the result of hexery, and then quickly work to reverse or remove the malicious witchcraft. Hexes were serious business, yo. That all is just some interesting information to hold on to for right now. We will be looking more closely at hex work in just a few weeks. Today, we will be looking at examples of mostly cures for the mundane and everyday type of ailment. There's also going to be some remedies for protection and a few more I would classify as straight superstition that I will throw in there just to give you a fuller flavor of the individual practices. We will take a look at some included in powwowing first, of course. But before we start launching into some of these cures and practices, here is a friendly legal disclaimer. All remedies and folk practices discussed in today's episode are shared for historical, educational, and entertainment purposes only. They are not medical advice, they are not a substitute for professional care, and they should not be used to diagnose, treat, or cure any condition. If you have concerns about your health, please consult a licensed medical professional. With that, let's go ahead and get into it. Wart cures, as promised. See, I come through for you guys, all right? Now, we already know that you can cure a wart with a potato and the assistance of a full moon and some Bible verses, okay? Did you think we were done? Not even close, guys. Other versions of this remedy utilize chicken feet, onions, or a bone. The bone is to be plucked from its spot on your land, rubbed on the wart, and placed right back in the same spot from which you found it. If you use the chicken feet method, a remedy that promises to destroy warts, in Homan's long-lost friend, be sure you roast them first before rubbing them on the evil bump of doom and burying beneath the eaves. The removal of warts was a very, very common remedy in old-time medicinal ritual practices due to warts being so pervasive due to less than sanitary conditions. They were common, a problem for many. Another cure for this malady was with a penny via a form of ritual medicine magic that relies on transference, and you will see this concept come up again. The basic idea is you are transferring what you don't want to an object separate from yourself and then giving that energy somewhere else to go, anywhere else to go. Rub the penny on the wart and then either spend it or leave it at a crossroads with the understanding you are passing the wart on to whoever winds up with your coin. Seems kind of mean to me, but I also get just, needing to be done with something. Just as prevalent, if not more so than wart cures, were remedies to halt bleeding in its tracks. There are numerous protocols, all utilizing verses of scripture or faith-based recitations to do so, such as the following. This is the day on which the injury happened. Blood, thou must stop until the Virgin Mary bring forth another son. Repeat this 3 times. My favorite blood-stopping remedy was simply to count backwards from 50, and by the time you reach 3, the bleeding will be stopped. I mean, you're just counting on clotting to kick in on that one. It's just logical. It is logical with a magical flair. Removing the heat from burns was also a common remedy and talent. Some people were better than others at doing it. The heat from burns can be removed from blowing 3 times on the afflicted area between cycles of religious invocations. Curing homesickness. All right, this might be my actual favorite remedy of all, and it's absolutely disgusting. But if it works, it works. Okay, I don't know what to tell you. Gather dust from the 4 corners of the home and sprinkle it into the coffee of the person who will be departing. You know where this is going. They must drink it. A remedy long before we realized that like 90% of dust is just dead skin flakes. It relies heavily on cannibalism is what we're talking about here. If you have chickens, eggs that are laid on Good Friday are especially powerful. Hide them in your attic to protect your home and land. They can also be used for removing illness. I most recently learned this cure for poison ivy from Your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. It is on YouTube. It's a channel run by Douglas Maidenford. Take some chimney soot, sweet cream, and jewel weed. Throw them in a blender and then apply this ointment to the area affected by the poison ivy. Herbal medicine, man. Mostly. I don't know about the chimney soot. Really not sure if that's going to be very good for you. But that is the remedy. Placing a broom before the door can prevent witches from entering. Placing it upside down wards off unwanted guests and negative energy. They had numerous broom superstitions that I'm not going to list here because many of them are almost word for word in the other practices covered today. We will be digging into broom superstition at length in another episode, just including these here because, brooms were symbolic of home and very important to all early Appalachians who used them and had superstitions about them to basically protect the health of their home and family. Let's wrap this part with a couple for the animals' health. Prevent parasites on cattle by feeding them written inscriptions from the Bible. And prevent lice on all livestock by sprinkling ash on them from the wood stove on Ash Wednesday. This doesn't even scratch the surface of remedies offered by the PA Dutch medicine and magic system. If you would like to learn even more about powwowing cures and get a look at remedies for things like burns, coughs, wounds, fever, and death, but also non-medicinal cures for things like protecting against weapons of any kind, charms against witchcraft, getting your cows to return home. I mean, we all have that problem. Stopping thieves in their tracks and charms against murderers murdering you. Check out the link that I've got in the notes to an early version of Homan's book, The Long Lost Friend. It is free to peruse on Internet Archives. Go forth, my faithful ones. Fascinating stuff. The Long Lost Friend, again published in 1820, written by John George Homan, was quite controversial at the time due to his bypassing of the rules of conduct when it came to this practice. He wrote these cures down. Big no-no. However, his book would become a celebrated powwow manual and also a favorite among hoodoo practitioners in the South down the road. Speaking of hoodoo, let's talk about hoodoo. Hoodoos medicinally minded were also of the opinion that illness could naturally occur or be caused by bad magic. Hoodoo had remedies for both, as well as remedies for a plethora of other physical, mental, and spiritual conditions. Hoodoo is a non-religious magical practice born out of necessity and desire for some semblance of power, independence, justice, and control over one's life. This practice is a very diverse craft and a culmination of numerous influences and is a very powerful magic-based tradition and influence in Appalachia. While actual hoodoo would be born with the enslaved African communities in plantations of the Deep South, its origin story begins far earlier in religious practices of Africa. Vodun is the traditional African religion on which Haitian voodoo was based. Voodoo was a religion that was developed in Haiti and was practiced by the enslaved Africans there, which was majorly based on beliefs from Vodun and blended in numerous elements of Catholicism. It is centered around the worship of a main deity and then thousands of underlying deities and spirits, including Luas, Catholic saints, and spirits of ancestors. These entities are very powerful and may act or intervene on behalf of humans. Sometime in the 1920s is when Hollywood would get its hands on it and give this religion a rebrand, changing the spelling from VODOU to VOODOO, and frame this practice as something dark, evil, bordering on devil worship. And that is likely what some out there listening right now have been led to believe. It is not that. It's a spiritual tradition that utilizes prayer and the Bible, ritual, and ancestral reverence, rooted in survival, identity, and connection. Now, if voodoo was the descendant of Vodun, then hoodoo was the descendant of the descendant. As plantations in the southern United States really began to flourish and more people began to arrive from West and Central Africa, as well as transplanted up from Haiti, fear and distrust of white owners of this scary, magical practice and the power and thus threat of revolt by the slaves that they feared it wielded, they banned it in the U.S. Protestant evangelicalism was forced on the slave population near the end of the 1800s. Many converted to Christianity. By choice? Not really, as many baptisms were forced and the threat of harm or death if anyone was caught practicing voodoo hanging over their heads. But an interesting thing happened. The enslaved still had their knowledge of voodoo and Vodun, and as they began to learn the Christian faith, they discovered there were many similarities in the stories, the teachings, the main deity, powerful symbols, and underlying secondary but powerful characters like angels. They would continue practicing voodoo traditions in secret by utilizing these similarities they found in the new faith system. But there would be some adjustments. Plants and fauna were distinctly different from those of Africa and even Haiti. Access to certain items would be limited. Diseases would even be different. The enslaved African and native populations would find themselves working alongside each other, as we know from our last episode. But more than that, they got along. They made plans of escape together. They bonded. They shared each other's spiritual beliefs with each other, swapping stories of spirits living in the trees and mountains for those of African folklore. They swapped practical knowledge and traditions with each other. The natives played a huge role in the herbal remedy and plant knowledge that would make hoodoo's medicine practices so powerful. Who knew the power of the local plants better than the locals? Hoodoo is a hybrid, magical, non-religious practice and a synthesis of beliefs and methods from the varying cultures that gave rise to it. It is embedded with rituals for healing of the body and mind, alongside rituals for achieving luck, spiritual protection, and desires through divine intervention from Luas, archangels, spirits, ancestors, and saints. It's a beautiful tradition with many features that we can see shared by other practices within the wider Appalachian magic and medicine culture. Historically, hoodoo has also been called by other names like rootwork, conjuring, and hoodoo conjure. And without getting into it, it does seem, at least with traditional hoodoo, names like rootwork and conjure were actually considered to be forms of magic within hoodoo rather than the practice itself. Like there were practitioners who excelled at working with herbal medication and plant work and spells using natural objects, which in itself would be referred to as root work, and the practitioner a root worker. From what I can gather in more recent literature, it's a bit more muddied or fluid than that and not really an issue to swap these names for one another. I welcome being corrected on that. Folks who follow the practice can be called hoodooists, and the go-to people, the experts at applying this tradition in aid of others, have been termed spirit workers, conjure men or conjure women, conjure doctor, cunning doctor, hoodoo doctor, soothsayer, root worker, and two heads. I mentioned a few features that hoodoo shares with other folk magic or old world healing traditions, like being born of necessity, the Christian influence, and a belief that illness can be caused both naturally and by having it placed upon you. Hoodoo was meant to bring hope and salvation to an enslaved people. It was meant to be a force for good things. And like the other Appalachian traditions, hoodooists felt a certain kind of way about dark witchcraft, black magic, and bad magic. And that is not to say no root worker ever has used their magic for evil purposes. That isn't true. But that's not what is intended with hoodoo, because hoodoo values balance. Like for every yin, there is a yang. Everything has its equal and opposite reaction or energy, so be careful what you're putting out there. Evident in their ideas about right and left-hand work. Right-hand work was used for spell work that initiated change and progress in one's life. It was for conjuring prosperity, healing, blessings, opening new doors. Left-hand work was for darker purposes, but only when necessary or restoring balance. Left-hand work caused damage, dispensed with justice, or initiated justice in some way. Often this shadow side of the magic was used to reverse hexes, curses, tricks, or spell work done to a person and sending it right back to its creator. It's of utmost importance left-hand work be used for the highest good. But back to what I was saying, tangent there, back to what I was saying. So yes, black magic, hexes, curses, hoodoo isn't about that life. Unless it's necessary, and quite often is employed to undo that kind of work, illness causing or otherwise. We also see a similar frequent use of celestial events, moon cycles, and the use of signs for timing of spell work, as well as the use of Bible verses and psalms for literal spell work, some hoodoo workers even calling the Bible their book of spells. All of that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some hoodoo magic and medicine they might have used to better their lives and health. Chew sassafras bark 3 times a day to cure a canker sore in your mouth. You can also drink sassafras tea for measles. For indigestion, gnaw on a piece of ginseng root. For severe indigestion, chop the root up and boil it to make tea. Old school Pepto-Bismol right there. There were a lot of different teas for numerous ailments. Peach tree leaf tea will stop vomiting and relieve nausea during pregnancy. Pennyroyal tea would help women with cramping. Mint tea was good for abdominal discomfort or problems. Spanish moss could be used to treat asthma, fever, chills, rheumatism, and also alleviate labor pain. Midwives were an especially powerful force within the hoodoo tradition. They were revered, respected, and powerful women whose services were utilized by both black and white women, and because of this, unlike other black Americans, they would be invited to go into certain areas no one else in their community would have ever been allowed to. They aided not only in the prep before birth, birthing the baby, and then assisting following the delivery for whatever was needed doing, but she would bring a whole bag of practical and magical tricks along with her to help the mother and ensure the baby's survival. A practice that she might use to alleviate labor pains was to place a sharpened axe beneath the mother's bed. The belief was the axe would cut the pain. To better understand the progress the baby was making, how quickly it would come, and whether there would be any trouble that she needed to prepare for, she might place a dried-up fern with tightly curled fronds in a bowl of water to keep an eye on. She could time the birth as the frond uncurled and leap into action should any of the leaves crisscross or open unevenly. Following the birth, she could also read the placenta in order to divine how many children total the mother would end up having. Imagine putting that on your resume. Yes, it says I'm a quick learner. I work well with others. Did I mention I also read fresh placentas? When are you due, by the way? Put a few drops of oil of anise on a teaspoon of sugar and consume it to cure hiccups. Use maggots to treat external infections by applying them to the wound. They would eat away the dead and infected tissue. I think I have heard that elsewhere too, or maybe I saw it in a movie because that one does sound really familiar. It does seem logical, gross, but logical. Some methods and techniques used to protect oneself from bad luck, negative energy, being hexed, and evil spirits are as follows. Sweep your home from back to front to drive out negative energies or any evil influences your home may be under. In step with Appalachian folk superstition and belief in general, Hoodoo has a ton of broom do's and don'ts. Again, we will take a look at more in one of the next episodes. Undo foot track magic with a cleansing procedure. Foot track magic is when someone creates a concoction of ingredients with a specific intention for you in mind. The concoction is sprinkled or laid somewhere that the person in mind is to walk. Once their feet cross the line, the magic enters their body and they are now affected. Foot track magic is used for both good and bad intentions. If it is done with bad intentions, it's thought it can influence negativity or illness in someone's life. If you are the victim of some foot track magic that you would like to undo, it is recommended you perform a cleansing procedure. 2 cleansing procedures I learned about include spiritual baths. Scented crystals and certain minerals, roots, herbs, salt, and tree barks are all mixed together to be added to the bath for the purpose of cleansing you and clearing bad energy and whatnot. The other seems to be more so if you want to clear a space. Similarly to the spiritual bath concoction, you would have someone make you a specific recipe with which to wash your floors. You can recite psalms for added protection. Both 51 and 91 are often recited during these procedures. One more, and then we do need to move on. This one comes as no surprise. Working with spirits, honoring ancestors, leaving offerings, and thanks to the spirit world are a cornerstone of Hoodoo, and crossroads are a very important place to them for magic, spellwork, and interacting with the spirit world. That is a shared concept across the other folk practices that we are talking about today. Make an offering of coins at a crossroads to appease the spirits of the crossroad and ensure the doors of opportunity remain open to you. Keep them spirits happy. Spirits do be loving their coins, so it would seem. Hoodoo was also passed down and around via oral tradition. If you are interested in learning about this practice and more of the spell work, there are tons of books out there nowadays about the practice itself. I was really craving when I started this research, just being able to pour through like an A to Z lexicon or dictionary of just the spells and superstitions, and I just had a hell of a time finding just one go-to source for this information alone. I have included a few different publications in the show notes that I did end up pulling this information from. Check it out. I especially recommend the first book that I picked up on the matter. It is called Hoodoo for Beginners, written by History Brought Alive. It is a very good source to start your learning journey. And now, let's get into our final magical practice. As we go through it, see if you can pick out pieces that have a bit of powwow flair, ones that might have a hoodoo flavor, and then those pieces that likely came straight from these settlers' home countries and were blended in with native knowledge. Because while all of today's magical practices were and remain distinct systems of magic, it's cool, or to me at least, to see where crossover might have taken place. I think it's cool to imagine moments when cultural contact might have occurred amongst strangers, basically sharing concepts for surviving a harsh environment, a hard life, sharing how to make do with what you had and everyday items and herbs and Bible verses because you had no other choice. Sharing their connection with something bigger than self and how to connect with others. And it's cool to see how these systems collectively contributed to the mountain's medical pantry and became a part of the core engine that ran the Appalachian worldview. Appalachian folk magic and medicine has gone by many names. Appalachian conjure, mountain conjure, hill folk hoodoo, granny magic, kitchen witchery. It is indeed a product of ideas and beliefs incorporated from different Native American tribes and practices introduced by enslaved and freed people, built on a foundation of mostly Scotch-Irish beliefs, but also we've got English and German influence tossed in there as well. The Bible played a major role in these settlers' lives, and so too would play a major role in their brand of magic, being used as a spellbook of sorts. But practitioners were not witches, nor were they doing witchcraft. They were healers, conjure folk, yarb doctors, granny women, and power doctors, working with the blessing and permission of God. And witches were just simply of the devil, capable of placing curses, creating illness, causing chaos. And these were also things the practitioners could do as well, so long as it was justified and no imbalance was created. The Euro immigrants brought many superstitions with them, along with belief in the existence and power of the little folk, spirits, haints, witches, and the devil to affect their lives in many dark ways via illness, curses, and even death. The cures, remedies, and cautionary measures could vary depending on the area that they were taught and utilized. That being the case, along with evolution of tradition over time, according to Jake Richards, author of Backwoods Witchcraft, there didn't seem to be one right way to dispense with this magic, which seems very apropos for a system built on so many different influences to begin with. So keep that in mind if you hear a remedy today that doesn't sound familiar to you. It may very well have just come from another area of Appalachia. There were a couple of levels of important go-to people in this practice. In addition to granny witches and power doctors, it was thought that certain people were magically endowed by God and had a gift of some sort, many of them having been born with some superstitious occurrence that made clear that they had a particular gift, such as being the seventh son or daughter, such as being born blue or born under a caul. So they might be born with the sight or the gift of knowing, able to speak with the dead or foretelling of events. They might be exceptional with conjure work, divining via signs, cards, coffee grounds, and weather patterns. A boy who grew up never knowing his father was thought to have special healing gifts. Some people may just specialize and become very good with limited but necessary gifts such as blood charming, wart curing, water witching, finding of lost items. Jake Richards says these practitioners would definitely be utilized for healing, health, and protection charms and remedies, but they might also be called upon for the more magical side of this magic, which included divining, fortune telling, curse work, communicating with the dead, dream interpretation. And you could ask them to make remedies or concoctions that could be carried around in pouches and satchels to cure what ails ya and to conjure. These people were kind of a one-stop shop in early Appalachia. So, we have a good idea of how it formed, who was involved, and what they could do. Let's take a look at some of these traditional practices and cures that they might have used. Warts. The gift that keeps on giving, you know? So many cures, so little time. Again, modern medical services were not widely available and warts were common. Have you washed your hands today? I feel like this is a good time to ask. I sure hope so. I don't want you to have to use any of these. If you have a single wart, rub it with the end of a stick and toss that bad boy in the swamp. When it rots, the wart will be gone. If you have multiple warts, this one might be a good one to use. Cut as many notches as there are warts onto a stick and toss that bad boy into the swamp. Don't have a swamp nearby? Never fear. Pick a dandelion and rub the juice from its stalk on the wart. Should do the trick. I have also heard dandelion tea is good for the liver, so, kill two birds with one stone if you go ending a dandelion today. Wash your hands in stump water, otherwise referred to as spunk water. If this one had any amount of success at all, might have had more to do with the washing of hands part than the magical spunk water part. Certain water did have powerful medicinal and magical capabilities to the early Appalachians. Water collected at daybreak on Easter morning, Good Friday, or Ash Wednesday was used to cure a variety of illnesses. Water falling from your gutters was used on rashes. Ocean water could heal deep wounds and alleviate rheumatoid arthritis. Cow water, a pepe, could be used to turn someone's luck around by tossing it on their feet. I am trying to imagine the mechanics of this procedure. Like, are you allowed to say you're about to splash them with pee, or do you have to, surprise them with the magic for it to work, Are they aware? And you both are, in agreement on what needs to be done, and you'll walk out together just following the cow around the field. These are the thoughts that keep me awake at night. Just as powerful as spunk water was boulder water. Running water was not only powerful for life, luck, and love charms and cure work, but also for spirit and other conjure work. Wipe warts off. Yes, still on the warts. Wipe them off with a rag and a prayer. Jake Richards says he wasn't taught this particular remedy from his grandfather before he passed, but I do wonder if this was thought to work because the rag was blessed in some kind of way. There are a few other practices that include the blessing of rags for use in particular other remedies, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a special wart rag blessing procedure. You could transfer your warts with this really interesting method included in the book. Find a creek that flows south or west, walking with the current, with scooping motions that go with the current, careful not to disturb the current and upset the spirits. Pluck quartzite stones from the creek bed. You will pull as many of these stones out of the water as there are warts to be removed. As you pluck the stone, touch each one 3 times to a corresponding wart and place it in a small bag. When you are finished, hang the bag on a fence post in a field or leave it at a crossroads. The unlucky soul who comes upon your bag of warts, should they take it, will take them on for themselves. If we have learned anything today of importance, I hope it is this. Wash your nasty, dirty hands. But also, don't take things that you find random. Don't take things from crossroads. Don't do that. Don't chance it. Extinguish the fire in a burn by blowing on it. You can also blow smoke on the burn to take the fire out. You can also blow tobacco smoke in an aching ear to remove the ache, and hold tobacco smoke in your mouth for toothache relief. Eating cooked minnows is said to cure alcoholism, the belief being the person will no longer drink like a fish. On that note, the hair of the dog that bit ya. Despite what we think that means today, that was actually a remedy. Pluck some hair from the tail of the dog that bit you and rub it into the wound. Place a dried corn cob beneath your doorway to attract good fortune, but also to keep disease away. Don't allow it to get wet, or the luck will rot away, and presumably the disease will come in. Carrying a rag dipped in blood from a bull's ankle will ensure good health and vigor. Eating cooked robin's eggs can cure illness, and incidentally also remove curses. I like those double-purpose ones quite a bit. Ghosts will make you sick. Sewing a piece of red ribbon into the inner lining of your shoe heel will protect you from this. You may naturally become sick, though. Cure a cough with a hot toddy. That's a good one. You can cure a cold with 2 cloves of garlic and some salt water. Cut each clove in half. Tie a half from each clove to the bottom of your feet. Leave it for an hour. By then, the sick person's breath would smell like garlic. That is how you know it's working. Take the cloves off, toss them out your back door. Repeat the process for the remaining cloves. Then soak the feet in warm salt water to pull the cold out. So creative. I love that. And garlic is great for immunity. It's great for a lot of things, but immunity, yeah, man. Drink sheep nanny tea for measles. Moving on. You can run the egg for all kinds of things. Cleansing, curing, discerning how sick you are, and whether the illness was caused by unnatural forces. Pass the egg over a person from head to toe to take out fever, chills, or the devil's influence. Break the egg into a glass of water. If there is blood in the yolk, you have a curse on you. If an eye forms, you have an evil eye on you. Figure out if there is illness present and how bad it is, based on if it makes the water murky and level of murkiness. Donkeys were believed to have miraculous healing powers. There are a lot of passing rites or rituals done for children's remedies, which we will talk about shortly. However, this following procedure can be done with adults. To mend broken bones, cure sickness, or prevent seizures. Pass a child above and beneath. So round and round a donkey 9 times. If this is for an adult, I mean, they can just do it themselves. Just crawl around the donkey by yourself. Once this is done, pluck 3 hairs from the person's head and 4 from their toes. Stuff the hair into some cornbread and feed it to the donkey. 7 hairs from the darker fur on a donkey's back, worn in a flannel bag around the neck, can cure convulsions, rheumatism, and fever. Donkeys were kind of revered animals, both for practical and spiritual reasons. Keeping one around would help to keep wolves and other predators away from your other livestock. I mean, they're big, they're loud, great security. But they were also thought to help keep the devil away. Donkeys, man. And they're just so adorable. Who doesn't love a donkey? All right. I had a bunch more for just regular ailments and conditions, but we are going to be running long, and I specifically do want to spend some time on Appalachian magic that is focused on women's health, pregnancy, labor, children, that sort of thing. So if you want to learn more along the lines of what we have just discussed, grab you a copy of Backwoods Witchcraft by Jake Richards. I also found some awesome cures and superstitious remedies in Witches, Ghosts, and Signs by Patrick Gaynor. Now for the ladies and the littles. Use an egg as a pregnancy test. Run the egg in a cross formation over a woman's stomach. Ask her to blow on the egg before dropping it in a glass of water. If it floats, she is not pregnant. If it sinks, girlfriend's got one in the oven. Side note, and this is real, you can actually check to see if an egg is still good to eat by dropping it in a container of water. Chuck out or use your best discernment on the floaters. Any that sink should still be good to eat. Back to the Appalachian pregnancy test, though. If it sinks, she is pregnant, and you can now divine the sex of the baby. Have the woman lie down, pluck 3 hairs from her head, or use a red string and tie her wedding ring, or her mother's, if she is not yet married, to the end, creating a pendulum. Suspend the pendulum over her navel and recite Psalm 23. If it rotates in a circle, it is a girl. If it swings back and forth, it's a boy. Okay, you are pregnant. Now what? Morning sickness. That's what. Ain't nobody want that. Nobody wants to deal with that. So, allow your darling, loving partner to share in the pain and the beauty of the pregnancy experience by passing your morning sickness symptoms on to him. I truly appreciate the simplicity of this one. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do this one. All you have to do is crawl over him to get out of bed in the morning. Your symptoms are now his problem. So mean, but come on. This is all in good fun. The big day has arrived. Because this is an excruciating process, and birth was an incredibly dangerous process, there were a few practices that they might have incorporated to help them get through it. To ease pain, open the Bible to Matthew and place it on the woman's chest or stomach. If the child was in especial danger, put it on the stomach, and if the mother was at risk, put it on the chest. You can also place a knife, arrowhead, or sharp axe beneath the mother's bed to cut the pain. You can also boil a knife, arrowhead, or axe in water and have her drink the tea. Be sure to turn all nearby empty vessels upside down to prevent the baby from breaching. Now, you think being born was dangerous in olden days Appalachia? Try surviving your first couple of years. It was thought that children were especially susceptible to harm from unnatural forces like haints and the evil eye. In fact, in order to keep kids safe from these things, it was typical to not call them by their birth name for most of their childhood, but rather refer to them by nicknames like Bubba. Newborns in their first month were especially at risk, and it was customary to get them baptized as soon as possible. Chamomile-infused milk might be fed to an infant nightly in their first 6 months to protect them from evil and keep them alive until dawn. Sudden infant death syndrome was thought to be the work of the devil or an evil spirit. You didn't only have to worry about the devil and his minions getting your baby, though, but also the little folk. To protect the infant from being taken by the little folk, hang yarrow at the head of their crib and drive an iron nail into one of the posts. Now, we know the Cherokee already had some beliefs regarding spirit people living in the mountains, but these early settlers, primarily from Scotland and Ireland, would bring some of their beliefs about their own little spirit peoples, such as fairies or the little folk. Jake Richards says, though these beliefs persisted, it doesn't seem like some associated little folklore made its stamp in the New World quite as prevalently. Still present, but not like hardcore present, was the concept of the changeling or double. This is when little folk steal your baby and in its place, leave a replica. So you may be none the wiser until your baby is in fairyland and it is way too late to save them. Can't bring them back, can't save them. One precaution the Appalachian Irish might have taken to discern whether their child was actually their child, if they suspected little folk had been up to no good, was to carry the child around a bale fire while reciting the Lord's Prayer. If they sneezed, that meant it was your actual kid. I wonder what happened if they didn't, though. So, reading about this reminded me of something, and it has nothing to do with changeling lore. I know that, but it did make me think of Appalachian mimic lore and this TikTok that I saw recently. So this girl is inside of a barn or livestock stables or something, and she's feeding the cow, and she's taking a video for her dad, and she's, talking, yeah, I just did this, I'm going to do this, and she starts walking. And as the camera pans, we see in the video there's this female person standing in a corner, face into the corner, so away from the camera, just standing there. Any born and bred Appalachian knows about these things, and so did this girl. She abruptly stops talking, like mid-sentence, cuts off, and immediately walks away and out to her car. I have got this video linked if you haven't seen it yet and you want to freak yourself out bad. I don't even care. I don't care if it's staged or not. I don't care. It's creepy, son. Now, the thing that has been on my mind is something that someone commented, and it is more terrifying than the actual video. Absolutely made my stomach drop, dudes. Someone said something about it facing away from this girl. Like, why does the scary mimic always be facing away, right? And someone responded, it's not. It's mimicking what it sees. That's the front of it. Mimicking what it is looking at. Dudes, oh, lights on. Funny SNL skits on my phone, stat, because no, nah. In AW, nah. Hell no. Oh, okay. I'm going to pause and take a breather. Okay, I'm back. Catnip tea is fed to newborns to help them sleep. If your baby has whooping cough, pass it under a raspberry bush. General rule of thumb for passing remedies and magic is 3 times. There are different rules for how many passes of a thing that mean different things, but you can't go wrong with 3, which is representative of the Holy Trinity. An old remedy for a colicky baby was to pass it backwards, feet first, mimicking birth, through a horse's collar between the parents. Ease a child's teething pains by rubbing a silver thimble worn on your ring finger along their gums. They can also wear a pouch full of mole's feet around their neck. Cure a child of their stutter by having them drink water from a church bell or baptismal pool. One more. Cure bedwetting in children with corn silk or corn root tea. We will end our exploration of Appalachian magic and old world healing with that one. As we can see, there are a lot of influences that have driven this concept of magic in Appalachia. And like I said at the top, this is just one side of magic in this region. I am excited to dig into strictly superstition and ideas about death, and of course the do's and don'ts while in Appalachia. It's all tied together, and that is coming up next. This side of magic was a good one to start out with, I think, because most people, most outsiders, are familiar with a very superficial Appalachian brand, like the don't look in the trees and no you didn't superstitions. But most outsiders aren't going to look any deeper than that. They aren't going to go so far as to understand the wide source of influences and the reasons behind incorporating magic in day-to-day life in the mountains. Therefore, they'll never see that there is actually a very good reason sometimes, and even logic, to these superstitions that we might think are weird or old-timey. And we might even think there's a bunch of weirdo, nonsensical stuff in today's remedies and cures and protections. But it came from a place of necessity to do something. Gotta figure this out and do something, 'cause ain't nobody coming to save us. And it seems like they might have actually gotten a few things right when it came to using certain plants and herbs for certain ailments. It took listening to others' experiences, and it took faith. But they got there with some of it. The legal medical disclaimer at the top of the show still stands. Thank you very much. Talk to a licensed professional with your health concerns. But they did. You know, people who blog and write books about this stuff have real-world examples of folks having had one of these folk remedies, even the ones that really shouldn't have worked, who say they worked. Like magic, they worked. And that may indicate the biggest unspoken part about all of these practices and other folk medicine practices. When you consider a cure for stopping frequent nosebleeds, like measuring a left ring finger with white string, wetting it with blood from your nose, knotting it 3 times in the names of the Holy Trinity, and burying it beneath a willow tree, it makes no logical sense something like this would work, right? Well, author Jake Richards would disagree, writing that he hadn't had a single nosebleed since it had been done for him 12 years before publishing his book. So that unspoken part is perhaps the most important ingredient in a charm or spell, something just instinctively understood by powwowers, hoodooists, and early settlers of Appalachia. You have to have faith. It's going to work. You have to believe in magic. There's something to be said for mind over matter and the power of belief. Numerous scientific studies and research on placebo medicine tell us as much. Share your thoughts on medicinal magic, cures, and old world healing, friends. Share remedies you were already familiar with, had already heard of, or those you were shocked to realize from which practice it hails. Share your experience with a remedy done to you that shouldn't have worked, but it did. I am so down to hear all about it. Send an email to paranormgirlpod@gmail.com. Message and follow the show on social @paranormgirlpod. Fantastic ways to support the show are by leaving a cool review and high rating wherever you heard it. If you caught this on YouTube, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also purchase merch and sign up to be a patron to support the show in that way. Links below. All ways you choose to support are always appreciated, folks. Please join me live on Saturday, December 6th at 7 p.m. Central for a chat about vampires and their lore with author and folklorist AP Sylvia. And I will catch you guys back here for another solo adventure down this Appalachian trail in just a couple of weeks. Until next time, stay safe, keep the nightlight on, and sleep with one eye open.